Here we have a question from Bayram. I'm sorry if I said that name incorrectly. But basically he's asking about using planar tracking. He's observed some videos on YouTube and he's followed the instructions. And from what we can see in the video when we play it back is that he basically has the steps correct. But his issue is when he gets to applying the mosaic, he wants to cover up the license plate. As soon as he applies it, his screen goes black. So he's getting ready to apply the mosaic. As soon as he hits it right there, the screen goes black. Next, he goes ahead and he moves the playhead across there to show us that indeed there is nothing available at all for him. So what is happening with this situation? I'm going to finish the video with going over what I think is the problem. But I also want to cover another part, and that's just basically in how to select for planar tracking. This is what he sets up. And so I want to discuss that a little bit and then to maybe improve that technology for him. And then we will get into why I think he gets this black screen. Okay, before we get into what went wrong with his planar tracking, let's just replicate this here. And what I've done is I did a screen recording of his recording. And so we're going to apply a planar tracking to this and show him how it should work. And what we do is we basically select the video clip, we go to the video, we go over to AI tools, and we go down to planar tracking. Open that up if it's not open. Turn it on. And what he did was he did the auto, which gives him the plane that you want to track. Now we can see that from his tracker, he placed his 4 anchors outside of the license plate. That could possibly be okay, but what is being tracked are the references of these 4 points, the pixels that lie below these 4 anchoring points. So I think it's smarter to pick some very distinctive points that are not going to change during the tracking procedure. So I would use, and you see that once we grab an anchoring point, we get this magnifying glass, and we have the X in the middle of the magnifying glass. And you use that, and we are looking for, and what I'm looking for is the corner of the license plate frame. That's going to be very distinctive. And it's not going to change with perspective. So we're going to put it right here in the corner. And we're going to do the same with the other 4, or the other 3 rather. And we're going to put them right in the corner where they're distinctive and visible at all times during the tracking process. If at any point one of the trackers lands outside of the visible range, the tracking will fail. And if it's a nondescript surface, then also it could fail, such as this being right here, that being right there. Now, again, this has nothing to do with his specific problem. It just has to do with perhaps getting a better tracker. And also, by the way, what you're covering is what's going to be blanked out or blurred out. In this case, it would be much more than the license plate, and perhaps he would be happy with that, and perhaps it would work. But I am just suggesting that if you wanted something more succinct, you would make sure you have 4 very good anchoring points that are going to be visible during the entire tracking process. So let's do the tracking. Okay, we've now done the tracking. And we see here that this is rendering. You notice that the red line turned from red to green. And we're now going to go ahead and add the mosaic to it. Well, perhaps before we do that, let's just scrub across it, drag the playhead across, and did it actually track where we want it to track. We want to cover up the license plate, and yes, indeed, it did do that. So we have tracked it. We have now let the image render. So now we're going to go ahead and add the mosaic, and now we have the blur effect only on the license plate, and we know that the tracker is going to be very good. We already scrubbed through. We know that it covers the license plate for the entire stretch. So there is the planar tracking the way it's supposed to be working. Okay, so we pick it up at the point in his video where he has completed the tracking. That is, he ran the tracker, and he is now ready to select his mosaic and add it onto here. And I'll just play that really short portion of the clip, and let's listen to what happens to him.
I click add a mosaic. Everything goes black. I lose the complete viewing section. The complete video goes black.
Okay, so my first observation is it's always great when somebody does a screen recording to explain their problem, because if you're only showing the problem, you can't really see what the other things are that's going on. But he's given us an excellent demonstration of what he's done, and he's shown how it failed. Now, my first observation is this red line here. As soon as you start tracking, and I noticed as soon as he clicked the planar tracking, this turned red. And that means that the image, or the video clip rather, that's down below has not been rendered in the preview mode. In other words, it's working in what we call a lazy load mode, and that means that it's not fully loaded into memory. Now, it's good enough for a fast enough computer to go ahead and work, but before one was going to start the mosaic, adding the mosaic, this should have turned green. And that means at that point it would have been fully rendered. What happens when you try to do things before things are fully rendered, Filmora will execute some commands that the computer cannot complete. And we'll get into that in a second, what he should be looking at. But my diagnosis of this problem is that he had a temporary crash, or a minor crash. The computer didn't stop running, but Filmora was outpacing what the computer could display on the screen, and so as a result he got nothing. Now, what can he do about that? Now, his image, and I'm just going to throw this down here so that we can see it. Again, we know that his image, after he did the tracking, before he added the mosaic, this should have rendered on the timeline in order for it to execute properly. He jumped the gun on that. He didn't wait for the computer to catch up, and as a result, I think he got the failure. This is what my thinking is. So what can he do? He needs to go in and check on the settings under File, Preferences, and go over to Performance. When Filmora is installed, it does check the computer hardware, and it does make the appropriate adjustment. And particularly, it tries to identify whether it's a modern graphics card or an older graphics card. That's your GPU. If your graphics card has the letters RTX in it, or in the case of an AMD graphics card, RT or RX, I'm not quite sure. They only use 2 of the 3 initials. Then it is capable of ray tracing. And this is I'm sorry, let me say that again. This is what's needed in order to do fast planar tracking. It doesn't mean you can't do it on a slower computer. It just means you need to wait for it to catch up. Now, if Filmora, by some coincidence, installed the wrong settings because it doesn't match what you actually have in your computer, that is, if you don't have an RTX card, it should not be selected. And the accelerators, in particular this accelerator right here, should not be activated. Both of these should be turned off, and this should say none. Conversely, if you do have a ray tracing GPU, graphics card, then it should be selected, and they should be these accelerators should be turned on. What does this all mean? What it means is when you have a ray tracing card, it can do this kind of processing faster than the CPU can do it. So if you have a ray tracing card and it's not turned on, the instructions are sent to the CPU, not the GPU, and that could cause the screen to go black. Or the reverse. You do not have a ray tracing graphics card, GPU, but it is selected and the accelerators are enabled. What is happening in that case, instructions are being sent from Filmora to the computer to process the ray tracing at the GPU level. It can't do that. Again, the computer can't keep up with the instructions given by Filmora, resulting in the black screen. This is my observation based on what I can see on the screen. I don't know the computer specifications of the computer that's being used in this case. I do know that the video clip between the ray tracing, between the planar tracking being complete and the mosaic being added, the rendering of the video clip had not occurred. Now, if you go down, scroll down here on the preview render, you should be working with proxy files if your machine is slow. A proxy file simply means that during your editing phase, you're using a lower resolution file rather than the full resolution file. Now, I don't know, again, what the resolution of the image is that he had, but if it was a very high resolution and he wasn't using proxy files, that could cause the black screen to occur. You only need a resolution clear enough for you to be able to see while you're editing. It is not going to affect the final export render. Any changes that you make to a proxy file will be applied to the original high-resolution file when you export. So for editing purposes, in this case, it may have been very beneficial to be using proxy files if he wasn't using it. Now there is this preview render part of it right here. If this was turned off, then the green line would never appear on the timeline because it wouldn't start to render. The default is for it to be turned on to render the image in the background and start after 5 seconds. In other words, after 5 seconds, if you haven't moved the mouse or something, then the rendering will start. He was moving his mouse around while he was demonstrating. We know for a fact that the image was not rendered. So I would recommend that he check the settings to make sure that the settings match his GPU. I'm pretty sure they probably do. That is, turned on if they can be turned on, and turned off if they can't be turned on. The next thing to check is the preview render. Make sure that the background rendering is turned on and will start after the appropriate amount of time. The 5 second is adjustable. You can have it start after 1 second or 20 seconds, whatever you want. But basically, have it turned on and make sure that it renders before you apply the mosaic. And lastly, or maybe somewhere before you start any of it, is make sure that your proxy file is turned off. You'll notice that I have mine turned off. I have a very powerful computer, and I have a pretty good ray tracing card, 4090. I know the 5090s are out now and they're better, but nonetheless, I can work without it being fully rendered. My computer can keep up with it. But if your computer can't keep up with it, use the proxy files, set it at a lower resolution, and make sure you hit apply. And by the way, any changes that you make here don't take effect until you close Filmora and restart it. I don't believe that's true for these settings here. I know it's not true for these settings. If you don't have these activated, activate them and then retry it. I believe the problem in the video is that the video clip was not rendered. And be sure to hit the apply before you exit in case you make any changes here.